These out. This is just a. We're gonna talk about emotions from a lot of different aspects tonight. And Dr. Mishea is going to take. I'm going to just kind of interview her, and I'll interject. And she's very well, very knowledgeable about how emotions affect us physically. And so that's kind of going to be the theme for tonight. But we'll also take some questions on other things too, because I think it's important.
Yeah.
And then how to incorporate essential oils into that, and how they can be an aid to that. And so I'm going to pass these out, and this just kind of gives and one to use. It's kind of what we call the emotional wheel. And it gives a good indication of some of the things that, some of the oils that might be helpful. Now, not all of them are going to work maybe well for you, but there's a variety of them that certainly will, you can choose from. And so it's kind of picking the right ones. But first, I kind of want to start off by asking you, Mishea, how do emotions affect us physically? Because I know for myself, and I don't think it's really hard to come to that conclusion, because anytime you get nervous about something, or anytime that there's something that's going wrong in your life, I always get this pit in my stomach, and I start to feel sick. And I find that there's this physiological reaction that happens, but it's completely in my head. Like it's not something like I'm not sick, or I'm not, but I feel sick.
Yeah.
And so we can't deny the fact that our emotions and the way that we feel affect our physiological being.
Yeah, absolutely. So what controls our entire being is our nervous system, right? So it's our brain communicating to all of our cells, saying, hey, behave in this way. Well, what if our brain interprets that we're in danger because something really stressful happens, right? So something bad happens at work, or something happens to our kids, or whatever. Our brain thinks we're in danger, and so it changes how our cells are actually going to function. So let's say that we constantly live in this state of stress. So every day we are bombarded with stress, right? And so if our body constantly thinks that we're in this fight or flight mode, our cells are going to stay in that. And as a result, it starts to change the way our cells actually work. So let's say that we feel that pit in our stomach. Well, no longer are we feeling that pit, but actually it's progressing into something more serious, such as digestive issues. We talked a little bit about acid reflux, things like that, or IBS. So it can really progress into something more serious the longer we stay in this stress mode that we were talking about. So those emotions, yeah. So
another question would be, how does the population normally deal with it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I deal with it I internalize it, and I just push it down, and I try to forget about it, which doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
And in fact, over the last couple of years, I really have grown to learn to not do that, and really talk it over. I'm still not perfect at it, and Karen can attest to that, that I'm not perfect at that, but that's how I internalize it. How does the population as a whole internalize it? I mean, some people internalize it, I think, by doing disruptive behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So basically, we're basically taught one of two ways. One is, like you were talking about, just suppress it and push past it. And sometimes when you suppress it, it leads to a destructive behavior. So anger or hatred, things like that. But we're also taught to medicate it, right? So if we feel sad, well, here's a pill for that. If we feel too much energy, there's a pill for that, right? So we're taught to do one of those two things. But really, these symptoms that we do get from emotions, such as sadness or things like that are really our body's warning signs of saying, hey, there's really something going on that we just need to address. But we're really not taught to just face those head on because, first of all, they're uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to face some of those emotions that we're feeling, and it's just easier to suppress them. And so that's where I find a lot of people, when I first meet them and talk to them, that they do have these things suppressed, and they don't even correlate those, that their health problems are really a correlation with that emotion that they suppressed, whether it was in childhood or, just a few days ago. Yeah.
And Karen and I mean, this is part of our story, is that I had, when I was younger, something very traumatic happened to me when I was younger. And I suppressed that as an 8-year-old child. And didn't realize until we went to marriage counseling 10 years into our marriage. Was it 10, right? 12?
About 8, I think.
I don't know. Something along those lines. That it was manifesting itself in all sorts of destructive behaviors within our marriage. Something that occurred when I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
That never was dealt with at all. I didn't deal with it. I suppressed it. I didn't even talk to anybody about it until it came out about, 8 years into marriage, 7 years into marriage. Nobody knew anything about it.
Yeah.
And so that's how emotions and those types of things can be, I find, just completely destructive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it can manifest themselves in all sorts of behaviors across the board.
Yeah.
And so another thing I wanted to talk to you about is some of the things that, some of the medications that Western medications that people get on, whether they be Xanax or things of that nature. Do you see them as useful in certain situations or never useful?
I think it's really hard to say because sometimes when I see people, I don't want them to just immediately go off the medication because their body is now using it as a replacement to produce certain hormones, things like that, like for example depression. And so I slowly want to wean them off, that's the goal. And so really it's all dependent upon the person. If they really want to get off those medications, I think that it's always a goal that we have in care. And I see a lot of people who come in with depression, anxiety, ADD, like all of these different things eventually get off their medications. And it's really cool to see because like once you start getting out of this fight or flight mode that your body tends to get in when we experience those bad emotions, and we start to reveal those things that, from childhood or adulthood, whatever, and those start to come up and you face them, medications start to disappear. Like those health problems start to disappear and you start to become more free and more alive, really. Yeah.
Right.
And life just becomes different. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to it is really getting to the underlying, the root cause. I think Western medication, I think in Western, the Western practice of medicine, I think has done a fantastic job of being an ER.
Absolutely.
We obviously wouldn't be living as long as we're living today if it wasn't for Western science and Western medication and things of that nature. But I think what we've done, and we've talked about this from time to time, is that we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
we no longer try to get to the root cause. Look at ourselves as a whole.
Yeah, exactly.
We just look at ourselves in parts and pieces. Our brain isn't attached to our stomach. And so our brain has nothing to do with our acid reflux. Well, that's just it can't be the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we are a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so those are, I think that needs to be addressed, and it just doesn't get addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And one of the things I think kind of an interesting challenge and something that Karen and I do from time to time when we do just kind of essential oil basics class is I will pass around, where's Wild Orange?
Back by the water.
Back over there. This is one of the things that I really like doing because it just shows how everything's kind of interconnected, like we were talking about. Wild orange is an interesting essential oil because for me, and I'll put a drop in my hand.
Yeah.
I smell it like that. I cannot be frustrated. Try to be frustrated. Put it in your hand and think of the most frustrating situation that you can be in.
Or try to be mad at somebody.
Try to be mad at somebody. I can't do it. I'm transported, for me, I'm transported to like Disney World and I'm transported to Southern Florida with my grandma.
Yeah.
Because that's where it takes me.
Yeah.
Like, I immediately forget about those, anything that's going on in my life that might be stressful or might be pulling me down or whatever it might be. I can't do it. And so that is, I think, the power of smell.
Yeah.
And how that, maybe talk a little bit about that, the power of our sense of smell and how that relates to stress and emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, this sense of smell, it goes directly to the brain, and the brain automatically recognizes it as, oh, this is a relaxing smell or a vibrant smell, and so it automatically changes physiologically what your cells are doing, because what it does is it says, oh, this is vibrancy. I'm going to actually change the vibration of my cells so that way they're vibrating at a higher level and therefore changing the way that they're acting. Yeah. So the sense of smell is something that's really powerful. It actually goes back all the way to childhood because you can obviously remember, oh, when you go into a store or something, oh, this smells exactly like my grandmother's cooking back in Thanksgiving, some odd years ago. And so the sense of smell has a really, really powerful way of changing your physiology overall.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can see on here some of the things that we, some of the different types of oils there. I think I see this warming one down at the bottom, which is orange, and it's cinnamon and clove and cassia. All of those, obviously, they remind me of Christmas time.
Yeah.
And they remind, those are the types of things, very warm, inviting, a fire, quite often. I mean, that's just what I think of when those things are present. And so I think that all of these in here, whether they be soothing or uplifting, some of them, obviously that wild orange, very uplifting. It's very, you know what it is when you smell it. And there's unusually good memories attached to oranges.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a thing. So the next thing I kind of want to talk about is how does the way that we eat, our diet, and things of that nature, because you talk about that a lot in your practice.
Yeah.
How does that relate to our emotional well-being? And is there a correlation?
Yeah,
between the two?
Yeah, well, 100%. So you are what you eat, right? There's a true saying to that. So put bad food in, bad emotions come out, right? So let's say that you eat a McDonald's hamburger because it sounded really great at the time, and it's like really quick, fast, let's just go ahead and do that. Well, how do you feel about 10 minutes after? Yeah, yeah. You feel kind of sick, or you feel kind of like, oh, I need to go take a nap now, type of feeling, right? And so that's just telling you that, oh, this is not good for your body, because your body's actually expending all of its energy now to digest what you had just eaten. But what we should be eating is food that gives us life. And so we should feel energized after eating because that's the fuel that we use. Well, in the same way, if we eat energizing food, good emotions or so a sense of joy, a sense of happiness will come from that too. So if you think about like McDonald's hamburger versus drinking a green juice, pretty big difference in if even just thinking about it, what's going to result as post-eating, right? So I think food has a huge role in how, both in our health, but also our emotional health as well. Yeah.
I often think of when I'm feeling down or sad, why is it that we always turn to things that are unhealthy for us? Like, for instance, I don't eat much sugar in my diet. And we can talk about that in a minute. But I don't. But if I'm not feeling well, or if it's been a long day and I'm tired and I'm a little cranky and it's 9 o'clock at night, why is it, and we don't keep it in our house, so that's one of the things, but if it happens to be there, I will grab for it, and I'll eat way too much of it. And so what is it about that, like that sugar, and our emotions that kind of tie together and make us, like we almost are drawn to it?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, they say that sugar has some of the same makeup as cocaine. And so why do people turn to cocaine? Because they kind of want to draw away from what they're feeling, right? And so we tend to, our brain automatically craves that because we've had it in the past. We've had sugar, and so we know that the brain knows what it feels when it has sugar. And so that's why we tend to turn to those sugary foods because it knows the makeup of that sugar. When you look at ice cream, you're like, oh, okay, your brain automatically senses that it has that sugar makeup, and it's going to give you that response that you want to help you kind of suppress those emotions. So it's kind of like an emotional suppressor, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And you get that high to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a high amount of fructose. And glucose.
Yeah.
So your blood sugar raises, right? And then all of a sudden, then what happens though?
It's an immediate crash.
Immediate crash. Yeah. And what you thought was going to be a, sustained and happy feeling because you just ate half a gallon of chocolate mint, immediately turns back into something almost worse.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it becomes this roller coaster effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, obviously, then you have the after effects of what sugar can do from a weight perspective, and then all of the things that come along.
It's a vicious circle, and that's what I like to explain to people is like when you get caught up in these emotions, these negative emotions, it can become a vicious circle because you suppress them and then you start to eat unhealthy, and it's just like you get stuck in this pattern or this habit of doing the same thing over and over again, and then 10 years down the road you ask yourself, well, how did I end up with this certain health condition, high blood pressure, cholesterol, high cholesterol, things like that.
It didn't happen overnight.
It didn't happen overnight, and so I actually challenge people to look way back into their life and figure out, okay, well, what happened, in your childhood, your teenage years, things like that caused you to be in this habit of doing the same things over and over and over again to deal with the emotions. Yeah. And
Karen and I often talk about, and I did a video for kind of a large community online yesterday about just men and essential oils, and how to introduce some of these new habits into your life, because I think it's really difficult to say, okay, and I know that this is okay, I've made bad choices for the last 10 years, or I've made choices that just progressively were bad over the last 10, 15 years. So today I'm gonna scrap everything in the house. I'm going to get rid of everything, and I'm going to start all over again.
Yeah.
Do you ever go down that road? Because I just feel like, and I said to the audience that last night was, that just won't work. Because when I'm talking to mainly this community, the essential oil community is a very female-dominated marketplace. And so I was probably talking to, and I don't know how many were on, 1,000 or so, but I would imagine 800 of them that have watched have been women.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out how to introduce essential oils because they found them really helpful in their home, how to get their husband on board.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, it can't be an all or nothing thing. It has to be a gradual progression.
Yeah.
Because you haven't gotten into this point in your life all at one time, and so you're not going to get out of it. Right? I mean, when we're thinking about emotions and we're thinking about things that you're not going to flip the switch on.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Well, I tell people that all the time because the same is true for if you come in to my office with severe pain and they're like, okay, I want you to fix me. It's like, well, it may not happen in one adjustment, so it's a process. Healing is always a process. And so same with, introducing oils, it's going to be a process. And so people have to be okay with healing taking time. And we're always in a state of healing, though, if you think about it, because we're always faced with different kinds of stressful events, whether it be physical, chemical, or emotional. And so instead of trying to get the quick fix, which we're taught to do, the slower process is better for our health overall and our longevity overall as well. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I think that I often suggest, and I think you were talking about it earlier, was you had gotten rid of all the juice and all the soda and all the things in your house, which I think is amazing because that is a huge, it's a massive step because our society does not, if you go into the grocery store, the funny thing is that most of the time the soda is cheaper than the water.
Yeah.
How does that even happen? How does that even work? Because it's water, but you add a whole bunch of sugar and syrup and high fructose corn syrup and whatever else into it. So I'm not sure how soda becomes cheaper than water, other than the fact that soda is laden with sugar, and sugar is highly addictive.
Yeah.
And they'd rather have you
consuming
that than the water. So I get that side of it, but what a great step. There's so many, even for emotional well-being, getting away from that kind of stuff because you won't be on that roller coaster, and at least a portion of it. And you're going to be at least kind of leveling it out a little bit.
Yeah. And one of the things that I always encourage people to do is to take their health into their own hands, because if we completely rely on other people to tell us what to do, things like that, then we have a hard time with the healing process, because most of the healing is done at home. My job is just to assist people in that process, but things like taking away, a certain food item, or really looking at, well, what kind of messages am I sending myself? When I look in the mirror, am I telling myself, you're ugly, you're not good enough, you're not, whatever, then obviously you need to change that. Otherwise, you're going to come back to my office with the same exact problems over and over again. Same is true for my, personal story. I was always telling myself from childhood, you're ugly, you're not good enough, strong enough, you're not worthy enough, things like that. And so when I fed that to my body, my cells changed. And I actually lost my menstrual cycle for 10 years, which was insane, until I finally decided to actually face what I was telling myself and being real with myself. And I attribute a lot to my personal chiropractor, as well as I started using clary sage and things like that to really help calm my emotions, because there was a lot of anger towards myself. And through that, I actually regained my menstrual cycle back, and it's just been perfectly fine for a few years now. But it's just interesting to see that happen in my own life and how those negative thoughts towards myself just completely changed my physiology. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to pass some of these around. In fact, I just see Cassia here. And so we talked about that warming and the idea of,
Yeah.
very soothing kind of. And so Cassia is actually, when you go into the store and you look at the cinnamon there, or look at cinnamon, it's not cinnamon. It's Cassia, because cinnamon bark is very expensive. True cinnamon bark is very expensive. Be careful with that because it could be hot.
Okay.
Don't rub anywhere else.
Okay.
But
It's
a hot oil. But very soothing. So great in the diffuser. Things like that. I'm going to pass around a couple more. Obviously, peppermint is a very uplifting.
Peppermint's a cooling one.
And they're very cooling, so there's lots of different applications for peppermint.
Peppermint is great for
Energizing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So so for instance, you're in a kind of a slump, I would say.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get that way in about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And often we turn to coffee and caffeine to give us that boost. I was talking, like I said, men and essential oils, and so often I'll see men grabbing Monster or Rockstar or Red Bull or whatever it is, which there can't be anything more destructive to your insides than those types of drinks. I will take a drop of peppermint or put it in water, smell it, and it's very energizing. One of the best pick-me-up type of oils that there is out there. So if you're in that sad state or you're kind of just feeling bluesy or whatever it is, peppermint is a fantastic pick-me-up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another thing I wanted to just hit on was we talked about diet, we talked about, but adjustments and from an emotional standpoint.
Yeah,
I know, I've had them, I'm done, in the past, and I had them after an accident that I had. It was really kind of I would say, I should have gone longer.
Yeah.
But there was almost like an emotional reaction I had after coming out. I was very relaxed coming out.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about and how chiropractic care can help from an emotional standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Adjustments, things of that nature.
Yeah. So we talked about suppressing our emotions, right? Well, we do that because we just don't have the capacity to deal with that, right? And so what happens is our body actually holds on to that. And eventually it shows up as what I like to call tension in the body. Whether it's tension in the gut, tension in the back, whatever. We hold it as tension. So that's what I'm looking for when I am doing an adjustment, is that tension in the body. And that can show up as this hard bone-like tension, or it can be muscular tension, or it can be this hot or cold temperature difference, things like that. And so basically when I get to that area, that emotion can be released, and as a result, the body is able to reintegrate that emotion, and you're actually able to face it and move on. And so one of the things that the adjustment also does is it actually allows you to be, instead of in this fight or flight sympathetic state, it'll shift your body into that relaxing parasympathetic part of your nervous system, which is your healing part of your nervous system. And so that's why you're able to kind of face those emotions head on once the adjustment releases that. Yeah. And so a lot of times there will be people that cry, or they'll be like, I went home and I was able to forgive my husband for, such and such, or things like that. And I can't explain, exactly why that happens, except for the fact that, the body was put into this relaxing state, and they were able to face whatever they were holding on to, which is really cool to see. Yeah, so these layers and layers of life are starting to be taken off and starting to become lighter overall. Yeah.
Right. And I know that over time, like I used to, after I had kind of given, guys tend to not show their emotions, you know, a whole lot,
Yeah.
but they hold their emotions. And they hold it in different ways. So I was always holding it like in my shoulders and in my head because I would get tension headaches.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just my body. I just get tension headaches. That's just how it is, you know. When life gets stressful, I start to get a headache. And in fact, even 2 years ago, I'd start to get a headache and I'd be like, you know what? Now I'm not taking ibuprofen anymore because I fixed that. I'm not doing that any longer. I'm going to put the peppermint on. And so I would put peppermint on, which it's great. Don't get me wrong. Peppermint is fantastic for head tension and things like that.
Yeah.
But I use that as a replacement for my ibuprofen.
Yeah.
And that's not good either.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't getting to the true root cause of why I was getting these.
Yeah.
And so as those emotions and as those things started to come to the surface, and that was through lots of different life circumstances and counseling and all, and dealing with these emotions, that I was able to kind of let down, and I wasn't carrying that any longer.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I still use peppermint when I have head tension. I still use it, like, but it's not something that I replace it.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful, I think,
Yeah.
even with chiropractic care. And
Yeah.
I think we need to be careful with even using oils, because I think sometimes they can be a crutch.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they can be that replacement for, believe me, 100 times better replacement than pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that we're actually progressing
Yeah,
on this.
absolutely. And that's why my office is not called Rise. I mean, I call it Rise Chiropractic for short, so people know, but I call it Rise, the Center for Optimal Living, because I coach people through that, like their homework. I give people homework, like, okay, and like April knows, like, okay, what are you doing at home? Like, I'm always digging up, okay, how can we change your lifestyle so that way you're not just using chiropractic as a crutch? Because I eventually want people to just come in for wellness care. That they're coming in so that way their nervous system is still communicating at 100%, and that's the ultimate goal. And honestly, I want people to just, be able to live a healthy lifestyle overall and not just use essential oils or, chiropractic, like you said, as a crutch. And so for me personally, I see my chiropractor every 2 weeks. But when I'm not seeing my chiropractor, I'm doing my homework. I'm making sure that I have time for some meditation so that way I'm ready to start my workday. I make time for exercise to relieve any kind of stress that may come on during the day. I make time to spend with family and things like that. So making sure that you have a good life balance is really important overall, to maintaining optimal health.
And I think the last thing I want to key in on, which I think that from our standpoint, essential oils have helped from, but also chiropractic care and just kind of taking a look at life, is rest. And I think that's kind of the last thing I'm going to talk about, because obviously we've benefited from using essential oils and diffusing at night to making, aiding us in getting a good night's sleep, which I don't use it as a crutch. It's one of those things that we just do all the time, because
Absolutely.
Just talk about how rest and sleep can affect your emotional well-being.
Well, gosh, that's a great question. I mean, we can all relate to the time where we only got 3 hours of sleep, and the way that we respond to the events of the following day are usually pretty terrible. We snap at people, and we tend to just be really short, right? Because our body uses rest so that we can recuperate from the previous day. And so when we get the proper sleep, which most Americans think that they're getting proper sleep, but sometimes it's very interrupted just due to the amount of stress that we're dealing with. So if you get the proper sleep, it actually helps re-energize your whole entire body. So it decompresses your spine, so that way you have a good spinal cord length, so that messages can be sent between brain and body. So that's one way. And then also it just allows you to, like I said earlier, just heal from the previous day's stresses.
And if we
Yeah.
don't get good sleep, which 33% of Americans, that's just a statistic, are getting not enough sleep.
Yeah.
That's probably higher than that.
Yeah.
And if they are getting, what would be called the hours of sleep, they're not getting good sleep.
Yeah.
Just because what they call sleep hygiene isn't good.
Yeah.
You know, the environment we're sleeping in isn't good,
Yeah.
whatever it is. It becomes cyclical as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, if we don't get good sleep, then we're more susceptible to sadness, depression,
Yeah.
emotional issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which then you can't fall asleep.
Yeah.
And so it just becomes this vicious cycle
Yeah, absolutely.
that occurs.
Yeah.
And so rest, and so I think chiropractic care, and just looking at the body as a whole, is part and parcel to getting a good night's sleep.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah.
think it's just necessary. Otherwise, I think our emotional well-being is compromised.
Yeah.
We can't get out of that.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to get out of that
Yeah,
cycle.
absolutely. And that made me think of something that I think is vitally important to helping us rest, but also for our emotional health. And that is to be in a state of gratitude when you go to sleep. And so one thing that I recommend to a lot of people is to actually have a gratitude journal. So write down 10 things every night that you're grateful for that happened in your life. And it helps you kind of release a lot of the other stressful things that you dealt with during the day. And I find that people sleep a lot better when they go to sleep in a state of gratitude. And so I think that's one thing that I've learned has helped me sleep better at night. Because at night we tend to focus on, oh my gosh, I have this to do tomorrow, this happened today, like your mind is running like crazy. That's because when we start to slow down, our mind starts to speed up. And so when we just write it all down, like the things that you're grateful for, and then maybe if you are thinking about the millions of things that you have to do tomorrow, write that down too.
Mm-hmm.
Write down, okay, I'm going to do these tomorrow. And if I accomplish those things tomorrow, I'm going to write about it in my gratitude journal and be thankful that I was able to accomplish those things. Yeah.
And I think there are essential oils that'll help with that too. So like, for instance, there's a reason why priests have used frankincense for years in prayer and meditation, because it's great for focus, and it's great for those types of times when you really want to focus in on those and then moving into like a cedar wood or a lavender to kind of relax the body.
Yeah,
And so I think these can be used as aids.
Mm-hmm.
But Karen and I have always said this is really about your whole body, and it's really about total wellness.
Yeah.
And it's a choice. It really is a choice. And you
Yeah.
have to make those steps, but you can't make them all at once.
Yeah.
Because it's just not practical.
Yeah.
It's not real.
Yeah.
But I know that Karen and I are committed from our standpoint to helping people make those choices.
Absolutely.
Because we've seen in our lives how different it can be.
Yeah.
And we almost, I believe, from our standpoint, we lived in a fog for a long time. And we still have those moments,
Yeah.
but we've taken control. I think that's part of it. Like you talked about that earlier, is taking control of your own healthcare and it's your body.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The doctors don't own your body.
They don't own it.
Yeah.
And it's so often we feel like helpless. Like, oh, I go to the doctor and this is what happened. Or, you know?
Yeah.
We can take control.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And there's hope there. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that's what you bring, and that's what we try to bring, is that there's hope
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But we got to make that choice for hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a daily intention. Like, it's definitely not easy for me to wake up in the morning and make sure so I wake up at 4:30 because that's the only time I have in the morning. So I go to bed at 9 and wake up at 4:30. So it's a daily intention. Like, I have to do this in order for my own health. And so when I wake up, it's like, it's hard. It's obviously hard. I'm like, I don't want to wake up at this time, whatever. But when I do, I am very grateful that I did because I am able to serve so much better. And we all serve people in different ways. And so, yeah, it's a daily intention to eat healthy, to exercise, to send grateful thoughts to our own bodies and to our to the people around us, things like that. So it's definitely step by step, and however you need to remind yourself, whether it's an accountability partner, or and that's usually your spouse, your significant other, that is the best kind of accountability partner, friend, things like that. I find really helpful as far as being your emotional pole that you can just kind of talk to about, what's going on during the
Right.
day. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to leave it with a quote from one of my favorite movies, which is What About Bob? Baby steps.
Yeah.
I think that's the key, is that we can't do it all at once.
Yeah.
Taking something small and, like you said, replacing soda and juices and things like that, and carbonated stuff with water. It's a small baby step, but it's in the right direction. And celebrating those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Celebrating those wins.
Yeah.
And putting those down in your gratitude. So I think we're done.
Yeah.
And I think that if anybody has any questions, we certainly would love to answer them or help in any way that we can.
Yeah.
So, thanks.